I entered graduate school 1993, sociology, Indiana University. Before that, I was a major in electrical engineering, Georgia Tech. I'd never taken a sociology class, but it was after I graduated and started just reading on my own that I got really into sociology books. So when I went to graduate school, I expected to have that same passion, but that first semester, it wasn't the same. It wasn't until I discovered this book in my second semester that kind of reignited that passion that I had. Like, okay, I'm in the right place. So, Racial Formation in the United States, Michael Omi and Howard Wynett just really kind of verified my love of sociology, especially for race and ethnic relations. It gave me a really good sense about our experience as African American people, what we had to do to survive in this land and to advance. So after I read this book, I'm like, I'm going to use this book when I start teaching. So I started teaching 1995. This was definitely one of the first books I used for my class on race and ethnic relations. Students found it very powerful. They kind of gained a lot of insights about how race works here in the U.S. and what they could do to kind of combat it and make things better for all people, of course, but also our people as African Americans. So I always use this book in all my race and ethnic relations classes. I haven't taught in a while, but I still check this book out from time to time. Still gives me insights. In 2008, I think it was, I actually met Michael Omi, one of the authors. So he signed the book, and I'm like, wow, this is great. Meeting one of my kind of mentors from afar. So even though I haven't really taught in about 5 years, haven't taught this particular class in over 10 years, still very relevant today. So, I don't teach much anymore, but as an administrator, one of my jobs is to try to figure out ways in which we can definitely enhance student success. So that's supporting, instructors in the classroom, but it's also looking at extracurricular activities, co-curricular activities. For instance, our students recently went on alternative spring break. They went to New York City, Washington, D.C., visited Harlem, visited some of the historically black college university in D.C. area, went to the new museum, Smithsonian Museum on the mall. Really powerful experience for those students. So I was happy that in the College of Social Sciences, we were able to find some scholarship money to help the students. So we had 7 students in the College of Social Sciences that went on the trip, and we were able to give each one of them $500. So my job as an administrator is to find funding to help these students in terms of scholarships, programming. Again, another thing we're very excited about is the new Black Scholars community over at one of the residence halls. So Professor Nikki Yaboa is the professor in my college, and she's the faculty in residence for that particular program. So I just love being able to support faculty and students and trying to have very rich experiences here at San Jose State University. I think it's very important that San Jose State University continue to recruit and retain African American faculty and administrators for a couple of reasons. One is to have mentors in the classroom so that African American students see somebody in the classroom that they can relate to. So somebody who understands their experiences, who could also be a role model for other students as well, not just African American students, but for white students, to have a person of color as an authority in the room, as an expert, I think is very powerful. Second, it's also important to have more faculty and staff be available for mentoring roles outside of the classroom. So we have the Black Male Mentoring Movement, for instance, which was started by Jamal Williams, one of our excellent, talented, staff members. So it pairs up faculty and staff with our African American men. So having more people who are available to serve in that capacity is really important. And one final thing I mentioned is for administrators of color, especially African Americans and other administrators, it's really important to be, in those halls of power, to be able to affect change, to when a proposal is made that may adversely affect students of color or students in general. It's important for people to have those alternative perspectives, to be able to speak up and say, hey, let's rethink this. Let's come up with a plan that might be more beneficial, more powerful for our students. Dr. Millner, tell me about the photo.
Well, the photo was done in the winter of 1980, 6 days after Mrs. Rosa Parks' mother had passed away, and her funeral was very much on Mrs. Parks' mind. So I was grappling with dealing with her sadness As she also had to recall the sadness of the Montgomery bus boycott. So it was a rather challenging day and afternoon, but Mrs. Rosa Parks was a trooper. She moved through the interview. She shared details with me about her mother's life and her mother's impact on her that she hadn't talked about publicly for years. And that interview turned out to be one that would be reprinted in numerous other studies, and it really was a turning point in my career. In many respects, it made my career. Okay. Because it got published in a collection by a Pulitzer Prize historian named David Garrow. And I still, see citations from that study in contemporary books about the Montgomery bus boycott.
Tell me about, at what stage of your career were you? Were you an assistant professor somewhere? Were you still a graduate student?
I was still a graduate student at UC Berkeley, and I was struggling because I was a father and a husband, and I was taking time away from family, but I had to get to Detroit to finish off that project, and I knew I had to get Mrs. Parks before her handlers surrounded her so much that she would not cooperate with struggling graduate students like myself. I had already encountered some personalities, I'll not mention names, who expected $500 before they would sit down to do an interview. So Mrs. Parks was generous beyond belief. She was generous with her time, just as she had been generous with her spirit and her life in giving so much to the movement. Rosa Parks was no novice to activism. She had been a member of the NAACP in Alabama going all the way back to the early 1940s, during a time when Black people joined the NAACP in that state. Their names were published in the local newspapers so that retaliation and intimidation could be directed toward them. And Mrs. Parks had overcome that kind of fear long before she refused to give up her seat on December the 1st, 1955. And of course, I knew all that. And one thing you learn about being a researcher is the more preparation you engage in before you meet your subject, the better your interviews and your findings can be. So that was a key to how I was able to frame questions for Mrs. Parks that she hadn't been asked before.
How long did it take for you to get the interview? I can imagine it was obviously through telephone calls or letters.
I had spent the summer of 1977 doing a lot of work in Montgomery, Alabama, and I would talk to and interview and tape people who had been veteran activists, because I wanted Mrs. Parks to be my final interview, because I wanted to know everything I could about the movement and about what people had known of her and what she had done before I actually sat down with her. But then I had to go through layers of handlers before I could actually get to Mrs. Parks.
And the interview was done where? You said in Detroit, but in her home?
It was done in a senior home where she had lived with her mother in her declining months. So it was right on Woodard Avenue. And Woodard Avenue by 1980 was really beginning to be a tough place to get through. And I had taken a hotel room on East Jefferson, and I walked about 40 blocks to where Mrs. Parks was. And I was wearing a coat, and I would notice that some of the guys would drive by on Woodard Avenue, and they spotted me with my coat, and they were getting ready to take me off.
Right.
But it just so happened that I turned into where Mrs. Parks was staying, as those guys were noticing, that I had a coat that they could pawn or something like that. So it was quite an adventure.
And what has that picture meant to you, because you mentioned that it still is on your desk. And so what inspiration, I guess, has it continued to be for you over the years and throughout your academic career?
That picture was with me when I was in a group of about 5 or 6 young African Americans who were in the first wave to integrate the University of Mississippi in 1982. I took that picture with me and I set it on my desk when I was down at Ole Miss, and I would look at it on many occasions because we went through some stuff at Ole Miss in 1982, taking on the issue of the rebel flag that tried my last nerve. But over the course of a year, I was a BSU advisor. The students at Ole Miss were successful in getting the university to officially disassociate themselves from the rebel flag. And they actually did it in the year 1982.
Okay.
But once that was publicly announced, within a matter of about 3 weeks, the Mississippi Klan visited the campus and marched all over campus, demonstrating their outrage that the flag that they had embraced for so many decades had been publicly disassociated from the university. Those kinds of things, were things that characterized early years of my career.
Did you ever get a chance, because if you're talking about the 80s when you were at Ole Miss, that's only 20 years after James Meredith.
It was exactly 20 years after James Meredith had integrated. And some of the best people that I have worked with in my life were at the University of Mississippi during those years.
Did you ever get a chance to meet James Meredith?
I met James Meredith on numerous occasions, but the James Meredith that I met in the 1980s was much different than the one who had, been around in the 60s. And that is no real surprise because I met a lot of veteran activists who had been, in many ways, brutalized and mutilated by the pressures of those times. But, war veterans, because that was a war for transforming this nation and bringing us toward modernity.
One, it was my mother and my father, and they worked as a team up until the time of his death at age 89. So what he couldn't do, she would take, she was a beautician, and she had some income coming in here and there, and she would do. And she was very muchly so proud of her 7 children and her husband, and she wanted the best for us. And that meant her doing everything she knew to do, and then some things she didn't know that people advised her to do. So one thing was, help out, where you can. You pay the $5 that month and what have you. If you need to, there weren't enough ladies coming in for their hair, get their hair done. Well, you might be able to do some housekeeping for somebody. So she was always looking for ways to help my father support our family. And that included this incredible vegetable garden that she taught us to maintain. From an empty lot that was across the street, she saw that as food production, and she called the landowner, whose name was on the rental sign, and got permission to keep the lot. You know, in a city, you can't have wild grass just growing every place because you get fined. She promised to keep the lot mowed and everything, and he wouldn't have to come into, it was absentee landlord. He wouldn't have to come in to do that. And we kept that lot taken care of because she decided to do gardening. And as an excellent horticulturalist, she taught us in the process. So it was like that when something needed to be done, and my parents agreed on it. My mother and father found a way out of no way and got the business taken care of. And that was just true, not just for me, but anytime there was a need in the family, their nuclear family as well as their extended family, their church family, their community family, they worked together to help people. And when I see the benefit of long-term investing in people, you're never alone, no matter what you're going through. And it taught me a lot about how to build my own community when I left home. Well, one thing I learned is the external, what you see externally in a person is not necessarily who they are. That's a part of it. But to be willing to take the time to listen and say hello and develop relationships is really, really, really important. Even if it's just the person you say good morning to every day, it has meaning to people. And when it's time to get something else done, they remember those things that, you saw them. You saw them as a human being who needed recognition. Just a good morning really makes a difference to a lot of people. You never know what they're going through. And my parents were community people. They didn't skip over anybody because their clothes didn't smell right or, their hair weren't pressed hard enough or so forth and so on. They were really committed to humanity, as were most of the people in their little small church there in that town. And it felt good. It felt good. And that feeling of wanting other people to feel good, I think, was part of our upbringing. You be nice to people because it's nice to be nice. And you'll feel nicer if you are nice to people because it will come back to you. And so it was part of the upbringing as a child. And I never, ever feel alone. I mean, at age, I think I was 19, when I was selected to do an international field study through USAID's training program. And I told my mom I was going to get to go to Africa. She said, Africa? What does that mean? Most people in the 1960s, most black people in the 1960s couldn't imagine where the continent of Africa was unless they had had some kind of really good geography training. And we don't do that very well generally in America. But when I told her I was going to be on a plane and how long it's going to take to get there and all this, she was very, very worried. But I had no fear. I had absolutely no fear about going someplace to meet people. And I think that was because growing up, we just had so many people in our lives that were just met, because my parents were helping somebody. They spending the night in our house or coming over for Sunday dinner or this, that, and the other. They weren't related to us necessarily. So I saw the world as a place where you could build community with people that were not necessarily your family members, but they could become, extended family members. And it was a good thing to have a full network of people. Yeah. So I try to carry that over into the classes I teach in African American Studies. Many of our students now are urban students, not necessarily from a rural community like I came from. But urban people also need to build a sense of community so that they can have the support they need when trouble comes or when joy comes or, celebration comes. It's just nice to have nice people around who know you and want to help out. Yeah.
The pictures I brought, which signify the importance of my going into education, are one of my grandfather, John Prince, and the little guy in front is me with my dog, whose name I don't remember, and my aunt Corinne, who was the first person in our family to attend college and graduate. She attended Howard University, and I would follow in her footsteps. Again, it's important to note that, again, as I followed my aunt's footsteps into Howard University, was my second university. I first attended Ohio University on a track and field scholarship while I was waiting to get a theater scholarship from Howard, which I was able to obtain. Howard had been my dream because it's our family university. I wanted to make my aunt proud of me. She would go on to become a social worker. She graduated from the School of Social Work and became the head social worker head of the system in the state of Illinois. And then also for a while worked as an assistant to Ralph Bunche and to Adlai Stevenson, who was the governor of Illinois. My grandfather's importance is a little different to me, and for another reason. My grandfather was a cook. He was out of Tennessee, not a formal education at all, started as an elevator operator in Cleveland, Ohio, which is the place I was raised after we moved from Tennessee, and became a chef. My grandfather was an inspiration because in his furthest imagination, he could never imagine me, one, either holding a degree or being in charge of a classroom that was integrated. We used to laugh in his last days the fact that he could not believe that I, as a black American, had the power of my grade book. I actually could fail white people if I wanted to, which came as an inside joke. But again, in his imagination, that was not conceivable in the time he was coming up. So he became an inspiration of the working class. He struggled, he worked hard to put my aunt through school. She struggled and worked hard to put me through school. And now I have the luxury of being able to put my children through school. So that was a legacy that was established some time ago. I went into the field of theater, not because anyone else in my family had gone into theater. I was inspired by my mother to continue to follow a dream. I guess I never wanted to grow up. I had this Peter Pan syndrome. And where the rest of my family said, you should do something practical. Why not be a business major? Why not do something else that's meaningful? My mother said, no. Not only follow your dreams, catch up to them. And I did just that. I went into theater at the age of 8, became a professional actor with a union card at 12, where I joined the national tour of A Raisin in the Sun as Travis, a little boy. And then from there, I would just continue my education in theater. I would continue my professional life in theater. I guess one of the most proudest moments in my theatrical career is that I was one of the founding members of the famed Negro Ensemble Company out of New York City. When it first started, I was one of the founding members, which was the vanguard of the black theater movement in this country. I had a chance to work with Amir Baraka during that time, Ed Bullins. I was right there in the midst of all these giants of black theater, the black theater movement from its beginning. I was able to sit down with Ron Karinga when he was coming up and started to develop Kwanzaa. I happened to be in that mix at the same time. I was in the Republic of New Africa as a minister of culture during those days. Stokely Carmichael Kwame, also who come out of Howard, was a good friend. As a matter of fact, my anecdote is, for a short time, my roommate in college was H. Rap Brown. I had 2 roommates. H. Rap Brown was one, Donnie Hathaway was another. Roberta Flack was my music teacher. So I came along at an excellent time. I was part of Howard University in the late 60s, 1969, when student unrest was there. When we were taking over the colleges, making our voices heard. So again, politically and socially, I had the luck of the draw. I came along with a great time, and I was able to use my art as a platform for social change and differences. I'm still very much active and a part of the Black Theater movement. I'm a founding member of the Black Theater Network, which is still in function. Ethel Pitts Walker, who was my mentor and who brought me to San Jose State, and a dear friend, was a part of that. We were both in the first beginnings of the Black Theater movement. We were on the board together at the very beginning. So I had these chances to have opportunities to be sort of a founding father. I mean, then I was very young. I was this young guy fresh out of college, and now I'm somewhere being close to the ancestors. So I'm an elder now. I don't know when that happened, but I've gone from being a new kid on the block to one of the elders because I'm still doing what I love, which is theater, and particularly black theater. And many opportunities to go and do commercial theater and just social theater.
I really kept my commitment to black theater. Although I do all types of theater, and I would like to be known as a professional theater director, not a professional black theater director, but I am involved and committed to black theater staying alive and being very important and vibrant in America for young people to look at. We get a chance to tell the stories. We get a chance to tell the stories of our past. We get to create and reenact stories of our present. And we get to also write and create stories for our future. Theater is very powerful because we get the opportunity, and my motto has been to tell the truth of people's lives, and especially to be a mirror and a platform for the black experience in America and beyond. So that's my commitment. I teach young people. They say people who teach don't do. That's a lie. I do. I teach. I am theater.
My name is Professor Samuel Obi. I work with the Department of Aviation and Technology, where I teach manufacturing systems. I'm also the coordinator of technology programs in the department. The items I brought with me are the Bible, my 2 books. One is my dissertation titled Factors Influencing Minority Enrollment in Vocational Technical Education Programs in the state of Iowa. And the other is my latest book, Introduction to Manufacturing Systems, which is a textbook that my students use. I've been with San Jose State University since 1989. I'll be clocking 28 years at the end of this semester.
How important is your faith in your work?
Yeah, my faith is very important to me and what I do at San Jose State University. In terms of helping to mold my students as much as I can to become fully functioning individuals while they are here and when they graduate, in helping us to build this great society. It has also helped me to develop other books. One of my books is called A Handbook of Productive Industrial Ethics, which was written to help our students and industry practitioners to know how to follow the rules of their jobs, wherever they are, so that we can be more productive in industry. I came to America in 1979, September, and started schooling in Oklahoma State University, and later on at Southeastern Oklahoma State University, where I did my master's. I did my doctorate at the University of Northern Iowa, from where I was hired to be here at San Jose State. I have a family of 6, my wife and 4 children. Yes, the youngest is 23 now. The oldest is 31, just turned 31. And she's married with our 2 grandchildren now. I have 1 son and 3 daughters. All of them are engaged in the workforce. One works for SJSU Monterey as a graduate admissions coordinator. One works for Kaiser, and the other works for Santa Clara County as a nurse.
Okay. Lastly, read for us your favorite passage, Matthew, and once you read it, tell us why that's important.
Of course, these are some of my favorite passages, not all of them. The first one is Proverbs 14, chapter 14, verse 34. Godliness makes a nation great, but sin is a disgrace to any people. This is a favorite of mine because of what I saw in America when I first came to this country 30 plus years ago. And what I'm seeing now, that we see kind of degrading in values these days versus when I first came. And I believe that if we sustain that level of value we had in those days, this nation will be stronger and stronger as it was intended to be. The other one is found in Matthew chapter 6, verse 33. I think I know it offhand. It's seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and then all these other things will be added to us. This is especially good for young people who are looking for everything immediately. This passage tells us that the first thing is to remember our God who made us. This nation is a Christian nation. We have to remind our children that when we remember our God, he will take care of our other needs, including our education and whatever, jobs and so forth.
And lastly, you mentioned having read the Bible how many times?
I don't know how many, but basically every year we read the Bible once, over once, from Genesis to Revelation. That's a tradition we have in my house. And my children, when they got admitted to college, the best gift I always gave them was a Bible. I bought them one of those 1-year Bibles. And I asked them to read it every day. There's a portion every day that you read. And by the end of the year, you have finished the whole Bible. In fact, this morning, I read my own inside the train as I was coming to work. Today is online. You can get it on your cell phone.
My mother played the most significant role in my life simply because she always taught me to believe in a higher power. I grew up during the time where racism was prevalent, and I did not understand why people of color were treated the way they were treated. So I would go to my mother and would ask her, well, why can't I do certain things, or why can't we do certain things in life? And my mother always reminded me that I'm a child of God. And she said that as long as I believe in the 23rd Psalms, and she would told me to memorize the 23rd Psalms, to study it. And within the 23rd Psalms, I will find the answers to life. And so basically, when I was in high school, I knew that I was getting ready to leave home. And the 23rd Psalms, I knew the words, but it didn't really have significant meaning to me because I was still young, impressionable, and when you're a child, you think that you know more than your parents or whatever. But it wasn't until I left home and I went to college and I struggled going through college, I realized, okay, there's something about what my mother packed me with as far as leaving home. Now, she didn't give me money. She gave me something in my heart, and that is the 23rd Psalms, and also the incredible belief that she instilled in me as far as believing in God. So it wasn't until I went to college that I had to rely and lean on those teachings, those early teachings. And by the way, my father was a minister. And so between my mother and father, that was something that was near and dear to my heart, and that's the belief in God. By the time I graduated from an undergraduate, I went for my master's degree, subsequently for my doctorate degree, and I was working in academia all my life. But again, I had to think about the 23rd Psalms because I was in an unfriendly environment. Even to this very day, I think about the 23rd Psalms. There are 6 verses in the 23rd Psalms, and I have them written and inked in my heart. It's because it's not an easy path going through academia, knowing that it is definitely difficult for African Americans in higher education. I had to put into my heart and my spirit, even to this very day, that I have to continue to move forward and not look back. At San Jose State University, I have to read the 23rd Psalms. It's because I do walk through the shadows of the valley of death. And what that simply means is not literally, but there are a lot of people that try to stop you in higher education. Whether it's your inspiration to publish, whether it's your inspiration to perhaps get into a better position or a higher position, there's those people that will try to stop you. But I realized as a part of the 23rd Psalms that my rod and my staff, they comfort me. The rod and the staff simply means to me is the Bible, what carries me in life are the beliefs that my parents had given me. This flower, for an example, this flower represents the day that my mother died. She died in January of 1996, and this is all she left me, along with this Bible. This Bible is a family heirloom. This Bible was given to my great-grandmother and was passed down to me. And of all my siblings, I ended up with this Bible. And in this Bible, my mother said, never forget the 23rd Psalms. And as I hold this flower, that's 26 years, not 26, but since 1996, this is what I was put on my mother's breast while she laid in the coffin. And I took it off of her breast, and I kept this as a symbol. And I said, I will keep this flower, this precious flower. The last thing that I remembered my mother having on her breastbone, I took that and I put it in the Bible. And I stuck it right there, the 23rd Psalms. And I said, I'll never, ever forget it.
Education has always been huge in my family. I was born in Guyana, South America. Guyana is a little country on the northeastern coast of South America. And I spent my first 18 years there until I left for college. In my family, there was nothing more important than education, nothing. I remember my dad saying to me one day, Angela, all you have to do is study hard and do well at school. That's your job. Nothing else. And it struck a chord with me because I had nothing else to do. Literally, I didn't do chores around the house. My parents just wanted us to take in our education. I was the third of four girls, and my dad and mom just did everything they could to give us the best education. And so I grew up with that value ingrained in me. And we went to a very good high school. It was called the Bishop's High School for Girls. And it wasn't easy to get admitted to the school. So to make sure I got in, my dad paid for me to get extra lessons. And I did score enough on the main test. There's a test you have to do at the age of 10 or 11. It's called the 10 plus. And depending on how well you do on that test, you get sent to a high school in the country. And the best high school was what everybody aimed for. And I wanted to get to Bishop's, and that's where I got. So once there, I studied hard, and I liked studying. My family used to call me Books. My nickname was Books because I read so much and studied so hard. And eventually in high school, I sat the advanced level GCE. That was an exam that was actually sent to Cambridge University and the University of London in England to be graded because our country was originally a colony. And I did Latin, history, and English at advanced levels, and I passed them all. And I got a scholarship to do my first degree at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica. So I did that degree, and that when I was finished, I got another scholarship to do a doctorate at the University of Pennsylvania. I was telling Moses, I did my final exam on a Wednesday, traveled on a Thursday, arrived in the U.S. on Friday, and got married on Saturday. It was June the 19th, 1971. And my mother made my wedding dress, and the first time I saw my wedding dress was when I wore it on Saturday morning for my wedding. That's how good she was at making my clothes. From the time of my birth until I left home for college at the age of 18, my mom sewed every single garment I wore. My school uniforms every year, the dresses I wore in the afternoon, the pants I wore, every single thing was made by my mom. And when I was leaving for college, she sewed me, what was almost a trousseau, she sewed me a suitcase of clothes for me to wear at college. And that's what I wore at college. So the first time I wore a garment that was ready-made that I went into the store and bought was after I got married at the age of 22. Up till then, I wore only the clothes my mother made. And so when I was getting ready for this series, Dr. Cherry said to me, well, do you have a garment that she made that you could bring? And so I dug around the house and found that blouse that I absolutely loved to wear. It fitted me like a glove, like all the clothes she made. But there was something about the colors in that blouse that I always liked. And so I kept it, and I found it hidden away in a bottom drawer in my bedroom. We then went on to build the value of education in our own family. And my children went on to understand how important that was. When we came to the U.S. to live, we had only about $100 between us, my husband and I. Because when we left Guyana, we were both lecturers at the University of Guyana, and the government didn't want us to leave the country. But when Stanford offered my husband a position, we thought, well, we should at least come and try it. And so in order to make sure we came back, they didn't let us leave with our assets. So we came with only about $100, and we've now been here 80, we've now been here 37 years. And we managed to give our children an excellent education. The point I'm making is that it's what you have inside of you that counts, not the external trappings, because we didn't have money. But my firstborn did a JD at UCLA. My second child is a professor at Cornell in history. My third child did a graduate program in psychotherapy. And my youngest, the baby, went to Harvard and then Stanford. And so we did all this with 4 children. We didn't have much money when we came. Of course, the financial situation improved over time because I got a job at San Jose State. My husband is a professor at Stanford, so it's gotten increasingly better. But we started with very little. Here at San Jose State, I'm a professor in the College of Education, in the Department of Special Education, and my area of expertise is literacy development, reading and writing. I have a book that I wrote, Teaching Reading and Comprehension to Ethnically Diverse Students. Literacy is the foundation of everything children do in school. And if you can't read and write, you pretty much can't do the other subjects. So I've always been really interested in literacy and in reading, and I've spent my entire career focusing on that. In fact, my research for my dissertation was conducted in East Palo Alto, California, which was at that time and still is a largely ethnic minority community.